A cougar fell from a tree in Montana's mountains, immediately attacked by 3 aggressive dogs below. Despite the cougar's bravery, it was outnumbered. This shocking scene traces back to the morning. Cattle ranching is a local staple, but with winter, predators grow desperate. They set their sights on the livestock. Jack, a lion hunter, protects the last line of defense. Today, he was tracking a cougar that was lingering on a ranch. Following tracks, he found a broken deer antler and deduced the cougar had hunted an elk, dragging it along. He soon found the dead elk, covered by the cougar with snow and mud to save for later, marking its territory. Jack found signs of the cougar's overnight stay nearby, including some fur on the ground. Deepening his investigation, he realized 2 cougars, a male and a female, were present, likely due to the aggressive mating season. Reluctantly, Jack released 3 hunting dogs already on the track. Following their barks, he caught up and saw the cougar cornered up a tree by the dogs. As Jack approached, the standoff between the dogs and the young cougar became visible. Being 10 miles from the ranch, the area was safe enough, so Jack set off to find the other cougar. He quickly spotted fresh tracks in the snow. The dogs, upon his call, pursued the other lion. However, they soon alarmed him again. The cougar had hidden in another tree, a dead one unable to bear its weight. The cougar fell heavily and the dogs attacked fiercely. Jack hurried to stop them as the law protects cougars from being hunted. Skillfully, the cougar escaped the ambush and climbed another tree. Jack achieved his goal and was relieved that the dogs had only attacked to defend him. Now, they could all head home. This is a manual bellows that generates a large amount of air by turning, used to aid in blacksmithing. Turtle Island has fresh blood with 19-year-old Raleigh coming here to apprentice. Since Preston's death, Eustace has been working alone, increasing his stress. Now with a helper, he's ready to pass on his skills. Last year, Eustace bought the 90 acres next door, but only made a down payment. The best way to raise the remaining funds is to harvest some timber from the forest. The two rode out to inspect the area, finding most trees straight and robust, although some were of lower quality. Eustace plans to clear these inferior trees later. During their inspection, they discovered an illegal moonshine distillery on his property, which could cause trouble. Raleigh suggested destroying it by explosion. They agreed and fetched some tools from home. Lacking time to make black powder, Raleigh, who excels in chemistry, proposed using nitrates and lemon powder to create an explosive. Eustace was skeptical, but trusted Raleigh's intelligent eyes. Raleigh placed the bottle under the apparatus. Then the crucial moment came. They went to a nearby ridge to shoot the bottle from a distance, using a stump as a stand. Raleigh took aim while Eustace covered his ears. A gunshot triggered the explosion, creating a mushroom cloud. Eustace was stunned it worked. Raleigh was thrilled to prove himself. They hoped the explosion would signal to lawbreakers that this was private property. Despite potential retaliation from a few crazed individuals, Eustace's resolve to protect his land was unshaken. As snow began to fall, hinting at upcoming events, they prepared to return home, ready to start a busy day tomorrow. Marty is setting up mink traps as winter approaches, starting his trapping season. Fresh moose hide serves as the best bait. He needs to reopen a 140-mile-long trap line. Fortunately, the supports are still in place. He just needs to set the traps and place the bait. Last year, he had a great harvest here and has high hopes for the upcoming season. This year, he plans to extend the line to its longest ever. However, a lake blocks his path. Marty doesn't rush. He tests the ice thickness and checks for overflow. Early winter causes natural overflow and ice to form from the top and bottom of the lake, trapping overflow water in the middle, which can cause pressure cracks. If a snowmobile passes over, it might fall into the water. Marty goes to the deep part and starts chopping at the ice, which seems stable. He rides his snowmobile across, hearing the ice strain under the weight. He pushes forward as he nears the shore, the most dangerous part, but he makes it across. The Alaskan wilderness is dangerous and unpredictable. A new gully appears, not present last year, forcing Marty to reroute. He carries a chainsaw on his snowmobile, adds fuel, and starts cutting trees to clear a new path connecting to the old line. With daylight fading, he hurries to finish setting the last trap. He returns to his cabin before dark. Soon smoke rises from the chimney. However, Marty has one more task. He chops down a small tree, leans it against the cabin, and ties an antenna to it to boost the radio signal for when his daughter Noah, who is 13, comes tomorrow to learn trapping. The migration of a large number of moose heading south creates a spectacular scene in Alaska, south of the Arctic Circle. Every early winter, moose migrate over 1,500 miles, a great natural spectacle and an opportunity for local hunters like the Morgans to stock up for the harsh winter. They aim to hunt several moose, but are unsure of their current location. However, the river below shows no signs of moose crossing, meaning they haven't missed their chance. Local laws prevent hunting on the day of flight. They must wait until daylight the next day. Now, Morgan seeks a landing spot on unfamiliar terrain, a big challenge for a novice pilot. He lowers the altitude and opts for a seemingly stable beach. However, the plane bounces on landing, startling Morgan. He struggles to control the plane, eventually coming to a safe stop after a bumpy journey. Next, they plan to look for deer and camp nearby overnight, ready to hunt at dawn. They pack up and head up the mountain to observe from a high vantage point. They are in the Brooks Range, where moose usually come from the east. Using binoculars, Morgan points out several moose, and with his guidance, Marg spots them too. They are relieved to have not missed the moose migration. The next morning, they rise early and start searching for moose. Although the river isn't frozen yet, the cold is piercing. Unfortunately, their luck is poor today. The moose seen yesterday are nowhere to be found. They decide to follow the river in hopes of encountering moose. Suddenly, Marg raises her hunting rifle, but quickly lowers it. It turns out to be just a moose antler surfacing in the river. Upon closer inspection, they find a dead moose in the river, its thick antlers indicating it was a large bull. While tempting, Alaskan law prohibits claiming such animals. However, finding a moose is a good sign. They continue searching and finally spot moose again on a nearby mountain. They crouch down. The moose are about 200 yards ahead, lying in the brush, making it hard to see them clearly. Legal restrictions prevent hunting a doe with calves, so they risk moving closer. Along the way, Morgan finds a shed antler, a good sign there might be a bull moose nearby. Soon, they see several moose ahead. However, there's a problem. The moose are either calves or does, making it impossible to shoot. Morgan is reluctant to give up, but as the sunset nears, they run out of time. They must return home before dark to feed their 4 horses and 2 dogs. The hunting trip took a lot of time and effort, but they return empty-handed. Despite the disappointment, such is life. Not everything goes as planned. On the southern side of mainland Alaska lies Kodiak Island, a place of beautiful scenery and untamed wilderness. Various wildlife make their homes here. Mike, who has lived alone on the island for 30 years, is today searching for black-tailed deer to replenish his home's freezer. He needs at least 2 deer to meet his needs. Soon he spots a doe and uses his binoculars to confirm it's alone. With his rifle ready and considering the wind speed, Mike enters a state of focus and decisively fires his shot. Although he can't clearly see ahead, Mike is confident he has hit his target. He walks forward with confidence, and indeed finds the deer, a young one that will yield about 120 pounds of meat. He must quickly butcher the deer because the island is home to many brown bears that can smell blood from 20 miles away. As Mike rapidly processes the deer meat with his knife, his hunting dog, Adele, remains vigilant. If she detects danger, she will alert him immediately. It doesn't take long for Mike to remove the innards and fold the deer's forelegs for easier transport. He then heads back with the deer on his back. After 6 hours of hunting, Mike finally approaches his shelter, constantly wary of encountering brown bears. Fortunately, no incidents occur. He reaches an old gold mining camp, abandoned for 50 years, which he uses as a temporary refuge. He hangs the deer on a beam but doesn't rest, planning to hunt another deer before it gets dark. To protect the meat from birds and prevent attracting bears, he covers the wounds with cloth bags. Sometimes bears track carcasses based on the circling of birds. After taking these precautions, Mike sets out again to hunt. With less than an hour until sunset, it's a critical time to test his luck. If successful, he will secure his meat supply for the next 4 months. Indeed, hard work often earns divine favor. On the hillside, a deer is moving, and Mike isn't one to miss such an opportunity. He sets up 2 stands, and with his rifle ready, takes aim. The deer, out of curiosity, looks his way. Mike fires decisively, hitting his target. However, the black-tailed deer starts to run. Mike quickly pursues it to the spot where the deer stood, Now it's the hunting dog's turn to be tested. As dusk sets in, Mike and his dog struggle to locate the deer, causing Mike great anxiety. If darkness fully sets in, he might completely lose track of the deer. Night belongs to the brown bears, and Mike prefers not to confront them. In his moment of despair, Adele finally reacts. Following her, they find the deer lying on the ground. Mike is relieved, yet exhausted. He hastens to butcher the deer, but during the process, Adele barks urgently. Darkness has enveloped them, and unseen dangers lurk. Earlier that day, Mike hunted a black-tailed deer, hanging it in the abandoned camp, then went on to hunt a second deer in the evening. As he busied himself with butchering, Adele sounded a warning. It seemed danger was hiding in the darkness. Mike tried to discern any threats, but saw nothing. With no other choice, he sped up his butchering, perhaps driven by fear. Having already stored one deer, he only took about a quarter of the best meat from the second, leaving the rest for the local brown bears. His shelter was only 2 miles away, but in the darkness, it took an hour to walk there. Nighttime is when brown bears are most active, presenting a significant challenge for Mike. Fortunately, he had Adele by his side, who could signal in crucial moments. Relying on her to handle a brown bear was unrealistic. Mike felt caught in a dilemma, his instincts telling him something was following, but turning back revealed nothing. He had to stay alert and ready to shoot at any moment. Under this tense atmosphere, he reached the last slope before the camp. Just then, Adele barked urgently, sending a shiver through Mike. He raised his rifle and watched intently, but nothing happened. He chose to continue on his way. Finally reaching the camp, Mike sighed in relief, but gasped as he saw the deer hanging from the beam had disappeared. Furious, he realized a brown bear must have stolen it. His efforts to hunt all day were for nothing. Despite his ruined mood, his immediate need was to eat. The delicious scent of deer meat, soothing to the soul, was irresistible even to Adele. Mike let her taste it as they both enjoyed a savory dinner together. Men roping horses always possess a certain explosive beauty. They gallop across the terrain, the lasso in their hands flying out and landing accurately around the horse's neck. This stunning scene unfolds in the Rocky Mountains of Idaho, where the jagged and steep Sawtooth Mountains rise. There, a pair of brothers live, the 6th generation of their family on the mountain since the 1860s. The brothers have loved this lifestyle since childhood. Harry, 29, is a skilled rider, expert in everything from shoeing horses to training colts. His brother, 32-year-old Kid, is a jack of all trades, essential for survival in the mountains. Today, the brothers are set to defend their home. In recent years, the wolf population has been rising, preying on elk after elk, and disrupting the ecological balance of the forest. The brothers prepare to ascend the mountain to hunt some wolves. The snowy path is slippery, challenging the horses as they carry their riders to more stable ground. The experienced brothers observe the birds in the sky, knowing that where birds circle, a killing ground is likely below, the fastest way to locate a wolf pack. Soon, they spot wolf tracks in the snow, likely from the previous night. Following the tracks leads to a distressing sight. A horse has been killed, undoubtedly by wolves. Normally, wolves rarely hunt horses or livestock, suggesting a scarcity of wild prey in the mountains. Faced with hunger, the wolves have become indiscriminate killers. The brothers know they must respond firmly to the uncontrolled pack. As they prepare to move higher for a better vantage point, Harry spots 2 horses. They are 20 miles from the nearest homestead, likely driven there by wolves and possibly belonging to a neighbor. The brothers cannot ignore their plight. However, roping horses in the wild, especially in dangerous terrain, can lead to unimaginable consequences. Yet the brothers are skilled and daring. They speed up their horses towards the 2 stranded animals. Their sudden appearance scares the horses, which start to run. But the brothers do not give them a chance to escape. Each manages to rope one horse, calming them instantly. Now, the brothers must abandon their wolf hunting mission. They decide to take the horses home and check with the neighbors to find out who owns them. After acquiring 90 acres of land from a neighbor, Eustace had big plans. He intended to select some large trees to sell as logs to earn money. However, a severe blizzard, the worst on record, disrupted his plans. Eustace was forced to halt his logging work because he didn't have a proper snowplow, given that snow is rare in the south. But as a master craftsman, he was fully capable of modifying one. The plow they had was old, and when Raleigh sat on it, the seat broke, causing both to laugh. They needed a tool called a tongue to modify the cart, which is made of wood and a metal axle that connects the steering shaft to the horse's harness for steering. To prevent it from falling apart, they tightly secured it with special tape that can withstand 2,500 pounds of pressure. Now ready, they set off with the horses slowly pulling the cart. Raleigh controlled the angle and height of the blade at the back. Once on the mountain road, he lowered the blade, and the snow plowing was effective, though it was tough on the horses. However, they soon had to stop because a fallen tree blocked their path. Raleigh volunteered to clear it, taking an axe to the tree. Eustace watched approvingly, impressed by the young man's energy. Encouraged by Eustace's praise, Raleigh's axe swings became faster and the tree trunk visibly thinned. With a final powerful chop, the tree split in two. Raleigh then continued chopping at another spot. At 19, Raleigh showed a maturity beyond his years, earning further praise from Eustace. Though tired, Raleigh had to move the logs to clear the path. Once the road was reopened, they continued their journey and finally reached their destination. Now it was time to cut trees. Eustace entrusted Raleigh with the honor of cutting the first tree. Felling a tree required directional control, and a triangular wedge was key. After setting it up, Raleigh began sawing from the back. Once he sawed deep enough, the tree would fall. The first tree was successfully cut and many more awaited them. Two men pulled a beaver from an ice hole, its plump body indicating top-quality fur. They had been busy since morning trying to catch it. This happened in Montana's Bison River Valley, where winter's arrival marks the beginning of the trapping season for old hunter Tom and his apprentice, Sean. They were opening a new trail, a challenging task. Last summer, Tom and Sean bought this wild land, hoping it would become a prosperous trapping ground. Whether it would yield a steady supply of fur was still uncertain until they set their first trap. The river running through Bison River Valley was their chosen trapping site. After some hard work, they finally cleared the last tree, revealing the river ahead, eager to inspect it. If the river was a habitat for beavers, it could mean continuous wealth. Upon reaching the shore, Tom spotted branches favored by beavers, boosting their morale. A beaver pelt could sell for $200. Tom speculated that a slightly raised area ahead was a feeding bed where beavers store their winter food near their den, traveling back and forth daily to feast. Intercepting this route could prove highly profitable, but setting traps meant cutting through the ice. Tom checked the ice, finding it not completely solid due to water on the surface, making them cautious about stepping on it. Sean volunteered to set a trap in the middle of the river for safety, tying a rope around his waist with Tom holding the other end. As Sean tapped the ice with an axe and slowly made his way to the center, he prepared to break through the ice. After several strikes, feeling close to breaking through, they had already prepared by cutting small trees in the woods, assembling them into a trap ladder. They attached a trap near the bottom and used redwood branches, a favorite of beavers, as bait. They then broke through the ice completely and inserted the trap ladder. The first trap was successfully set. They proceeded to set more traps and returned to the first one at dusk, hours later. The ice had refrozen. After breaking it open and lifting out the ladder, a beaver surfaced, a satisfying result proving the river was home to a family of beavers, promising a hopeful future. Jason picked up a stone from the creek. It was iron ore, the very purpose of his trip. As a blacksmith, the birth of his second daughter last year had increased his financial pressure, with thousands of dollars annually needed for raw steel materials. To save on these costs, he had learned of potential iron ore deposits in this area. Soon enough, Jason found a cave. He put on his headlamp and resolutely entered. The cave's interior was complex, with only a narrow space leading deeper. Hesitant, but too far to give up, Jason attempted to squeeze further down, but got stuck. Taking a deep breath, he pushed himself through, using brute force, and discovered a surprisingly spacious area below. The space seemed to have underground water flowing. Water droplets continuously dripped from the rocks, adding a sense of dread to the enclosed space. Jason worked hard to identify the rust-red, oxidized iron ore, a sign of iron that has corroded over time. The small stone he initially picked up was indeed iron ore, but too small to use. However, its presence indicated a rich supply of iron ore in the cave. He saw several larger pieces in the water, a promising sign. Encouraged, Jason prepared to delve deeper into a crevice, but the space was too tight. He took out some black powder, lit the fuse, and a loud explosion expanded the passage. Walking through, he found iron ore of suitable size. He collected several pieces, but turning ore into steel would require smelting, a process that refines the raw material into pure metal. Jason needed at least 50 pounds of ore and had collected 20 pounds so far. As he ventured deeper, the cave narrowed and bats appeared. Carefully moving forward, he accidentally got his foot stuck in a crevice. After much effort, he freed himself, but his boot was torn. He repaired it using copper wire as thread. After repairing his boot, Jason continued deeper into the cave. He even spotted a newt, intrigued by the diversity of the underground world. After exploring further, he found a small area rich in iron ore in a corner. He collected these stones, and now he was ready to head home. The collected ore was enough for his experiments. The lynx stood pitifully in a tree, with several hounds barking and snarling at it below. Jack's arrival disrupted this standoff, and the lynx leapt from the tree, opting to flee. The hounds quickly followed, reigniting the chase. This took place in southwestern Montana, where Jack is a mountain lion hunter responsible for protecting local ranches from predators like cougars, lynxes, and wolves. This particular lynx had provoked him. The pursuit had been ongoing since the previous day, and this was now the fourth chase. Jack was lagging behind, following the tracks and trying to catch up, but he was eager to end the chase as one of the hounds had been injured and needed immediate veterinary care. Yet 2 other hounds were still on the lynx's trail, which worried Jack immensely. Fortunately, he soon heard the hounds barking. When he caught up, he found the lynx cornered up a tree again. The lynx's eyes pleaded for mercy, suggesting the chase had served its purpose. While praising the hounds, Jack secured them with leashes to prevent further pursuit. Under the lynx's watchful eyes, he left with 2 of the hounds and later regrouped with the other 2. He rushed back to his truck, loaded the hounds and tried to start it, but it wouldn't ignite. Thinking quickly, Jack decided to use the vehicle's momentum to help start the engine. After several attempts while reversing, the engine finally started. Jack then drove to the hospital. Upon arrival, 2 veterinarians examined the injured hound and determined that the wounds were not severe and would not hinder future activities. The hound simply needed stitches and some antibiotics. The hound behaved well during the injection process. After it was placed on the operating table, the vet stitched the wounds. Jack watched sympathetically. He considered the hounds as family. The surgery was a success, but the injured hound would need a few weeks of recovery before it could join hunting activities again. Jack planned to head home and cook meat for the hounds as a treat for their efforts. This is a rifle powered by black powder. Its power impressive as it directly hits a distant target. It was crafted by 2 elderly men in just 1 day and 1 night. Early yesterday morning, Tom received a call from his brother Jack, who had sold his ranch and planned to move to Bison River Valley to be Tom's neighbor. Due to the hurried sale, Jack had only a week to pack up, but he still had an outstanding rifle order to complete and needed Tom's help. Jack is a master rifle maker, especially skilled in crafting 19th century style rifles. This particular order was for a legendary firearm called the Hawken, once used for hunting American bison, and now a collectible worth $2,000. The 2 began their work using a tool called the underrib, which they welded beneath the barrel. Another tool, the ramrod ring, was used to load the powder and ball into the barrel. Jack used a high-temperature torch to melt the steel wire onto the rib, and after heating it red hot, he attached the ramrod ring tightly on top. He used the torch again to further bond the 2 parts. Once cooled, they formed a solid unit. The most challenging part was completed. Next, Jack worked on the stock, already carved from wood. Now, it was time to assemble the components. The first step was to install a metal pin known as a locking key, which secures the barrel. Because there was a loop under the barrel, they cut a notch on each side of the stock, inserted the barrel into the slot, and passed the locking key through the loop, coming out the other side to stabilize the barrel. Tom checked and was very satisfied with the outcome. Next came the assembly of the small parts, a meticulous and time-consuming job. As they drank coffee, they installed various components in their respective places. It was dawn by the time they finished this all-night effort. Jack's rifle used a flintlock. He wrapped a piece of flint in deer leather and fixed it onto the hammer with a bolt. When the hammer was cocked and the trigger pulled, the hammer fell, striking the flint to produce sparks. Now it was time to test the rifle outside. Jack poured some black powder into the rifle's chamber and used a rod to compress it. After ensuring the rifle was loaded correctly, Tom aimed at a distant target and fired. The shot was accurate, hitting the target precisely. The rifle performed perfectly in their tests, securing the $2,000. The man, rifle in hand, was crawling across the snowy mountainside with caution because he was entering the territory of mountain goats, creatures that lived in the snow and possessed keen senses. Harsh environments had left them with few predators, but the allure of their meat occasionally drew hunters to these risky heights. Morgan was one of those hunters. To reach this remote spot, he had woken up at 1 a.m, fortified himself with a large cup of coffee, and set out with his gear after receiving well wishes from his girlfriend, Marg, who hoped for his success. Their recent attempt at hunting moose had ended fruitlessly after 2 days. Carrying his family's hopes, Morgan entered the darkness, feeling like a warrior who might not return. Not long after, he slipped, as 2 feet of fresh snow made the path slippery. Swearing under his breath, he reached the riverbank. The outside temperature was a frigid -20°C. Though the river water was ice cold, it was easier to navigate than the slushy snow. Morgan planned to reach the goats' area by dawn, but trekking through the river was not smooth. He almost fell again on slippery stones, and the water grew deeper as he progressed. Eventually, Morgan had to climb back onto the bank. He put on his skis and started walking through the forest, where walking in the snow was physically demanding. Fortunately, he soon saw some rocks, signaling the proximity of the goats' domain. After 8 hours of grueling trek, Morgan finally saw hope, but this was just the beginning. He needed to climb the steep rocky mountains to reach the ridge where the goats lived, promising to be a grueling journey. Indeed, during the climb, Morgan fell, but fortunately was not injured. He got up and continued, driven by the need to provide meat for his family. His determination seemed to create miracles. He managed to get past the rocky area and reach the open mountaintop. He found a sheltered spot to wait for daylight. As the sun rose over the Alaska range, Morgan began his hunting operation. The goats lived on the steepest parts of the mountain, and it took much effort for Morgan to get close to the summit. To avoid alarming the goats, he started crawling. When he found an adequate position, he used his rifle's scope to search each ridge, which could potentially harbor goats. After some searching, Morgan spotted some, but they were too far away. He needed to get within 150 yards to ensure accuracy. He hesitated to shoot because the wind was strong at the summit, and he was 300 yards away, making a successful shot difficult. Known for their skittish nature, startling the goats could mean losing his chance, so Morgan chose to retreat slowly and approach from the side. Although navigating the rugged, snowy mountains was challenging, he had no other choice. His home freezer was empty, and this was his last opportunity. If he failed, the winter would be dire for him and Marg. Braving the biting cold wind, Morgan climbed, feeling incredibly weak and relying solely on his willpower. As he climbed, the situation worsened. He reached the area where the goats had been, but now it was just a uniform landscape with no sign of them. The elusive mountain spirits had moved. Despairing yet unwilling to give up, Morgan climbed mechanically, hoping the clouds wouldn't descend further as they severely limited visibility. He set down his backpack and took out binoculars to watch, but the foggy front obscured any view of the goats. Suddenly, a faint sound startled him. He quickly grabbed his rifle and climbed to the summit, where he saw fresh goat droppings in the snow. Looking around, he felt encouraged, thinking the goats might be nearby. Inspired, Morgan resumed his search. As he walked, he suddenly fell down. A goat was right in front of him. He signaled his photographer to stay quiet, as this goat represented their last hope. Morgan quickly loaded his chamber, then slowly approached with his rifle. His heartbeat quickened, but his steps were steady as he entered a state of unity with his rifle, feeling as if the world consisted only of him and the goat. Unexpectedly, there were 4 goats ahead, sensing danger and desperately fleeing. This broke Morgan's concentration, and he couldn't hit a moving target. Although frustrated by the reality, he had to accept it. As dusk approached, Morgan completely lost hope of hunting. Disappointed, he began his return journey, facing the daunting challenge of how to survive the winter. What is happiness? Mike can tell you. It's hunting a deer during the day and another in the evening. And sadness? He knows that too. It's coming home to find the first deer stolen. Within a day, Mike experienced extreme highs and lows. A few days later, with a better mindset, he resumed his hunting journey, as his protein quota for the season was still insufficient. Today's good weather encouraged him to try again, but instead of a deer, he encountered a brown bear. Mike and the bear have a love-hate relationship. Annoyed by the bear's theft, he wouldn't easily hunt it, relying on bears to attract tourists during bear hunting season. Finding the bear searching for food in a beaver pond, Mike knew its presence could complicate his hunt. After leaving the bear, he found deer tracks and soon spotted a deer. He readied his rifle and took a clear shot. The deer moved briefly after the shot due to an adrenaline surge, but soon fell. Mike quickly processed the deer, aware of the nearby bear. With his hunting dog Adele on guard, he worked swiftly, packing the meat to avoid danger. 3 miles from home, the journey back was risky. Armed with his rifle and accompanied by his dog, he was ready to defend himself if necessary. However, a bear appeared ahead. Hiding, Mike hoped it would leave. Sensing his intent, the bear avoided confrontation, and Mike continued home, relieved to see his property approaching. In central Idaho, Jack just sold his ranch and had only 2 days left to hand it over. The elderly couple was packing up, while Jack's brother Tom was feeding the livestock, providing them with hay and water. However, the water faucet suddenly stopped working, indicating a problem with the water supply system. Tom called Jack for help. They suspected an issue and headed to the pump house, where there was a well 40 feet deep. Jack went inside with a flashlight, found a switch on the wall, and removed 2 glass fuses. Tom checked and found the fuses intact. Jack put them back and then checked the nearby capacitor, which was corroded. They replaced it with a new capacitor. After Jack finished the installation, they heard the water pump starting up. Tom went to the faucet, turned it on, and after a short wait, water began to flow again. Problem solved. They continued packing and loaded some items onto the truck. Tom left for home first, and Jack's family planned to move 2 days later. This is a 13-year-old girl playing with a shotgun. She is Noah, a hunter's daughter, inheriting a family tradition. Despite her being a girl, Marty hopes Noah will learn hunting skills. She has undergone basic survival training, and this winter marks an important practical journey for her. Before they leave, there are important tasks to complete. Dominic, his wife, will manage their homestead, and to ease her burden, Marty chops a lot of firewood with Noah's help. They finish preparing the wood needed for the entire winter. Marty is reassured by his daughter's excellent performance. He doesn't demand that Noah continue his profession, but rather, he wants her to have an additional skill for more life choices. This is Marty's intention. The next day, they start checking the airplane and prepare to change the oil. The airplane must have its oil changed periodically to prevent combustion byproducts from accumulating and causing engine failure. Marty explains and works, anticipating the day Noah will have to do this independently. After changing the oil, Marty loads supplies onto the plane. He then expresses his thoughts to the cameraman. He plans to take his daughter alone into the wilderness for learning and growth and does not want this process filmed. The cameraman is perplexed by the sudden decision, but tries to negotiate. However, Marty stands by his principle, and the cameraman reluctantly accepts. Outsiders might not understand, but for the past 8 years, Marty has lived under the camera, showing the world the true life here. However, this year is a special time for him and his daughter, a rite of passage for her growth. He views this time as a private secret between father and daughter, and does not wish it to be filmed. A trapper's life is not just a job, but a belief Marty wants to share with his daughter. Now ready to leave, they start the plane with his wife's blessings and embark on a 3-month adventure, eagerly anticipated by both. Mike is a sharpshooter who can take down a deer with a single shot. He also works as a bear hunting guide. Due to his reputation, he attracts tourists every bear hunting season. Based in southern Alaska's Kodiak Island, the area is notorious for its large and ferocious brown bears. Today, a visitor has come to challenge these beasts, guided by Mike. The two, each armed with a shotgun, begin their bear hunt. Tim, an enthusiastic hunter from Texas, has long wanted to collect a large brown bear and sees this as a rare opportunity. The goal of bear hunting here is to control the island's bear population. Local laws allow hunters to target only the most aggressive males, as aggressive male bears can kill cubs. Hunting these males helps protect the cubs' healthy growth. Using binoculars, they start to differentiate between male and female bears from a distance, identifying males by their dominant swagger. Mike's strategy involves watching the coastal areas where bears fish. This requires patience and luck. Fortunately, their luck holds when they spot a bear approaching through the underbrush. The men stand up, ready to confront the bear. They descend from the mountain, cross a creek, and walk along the riverbed to minimize danger from any bears that might be hiding in the bushes. Suddenly, the hunting dog whines, signaling nearby activity. They survey their surroundings, feeling an eerie tension, ready for a potential fight. It seems the brown bear might be nearby, but nothing happens immediately. Continuing on, they soon see the beach and the bear. Mike signals to Tim, who quickly readies his rifle. Unaware of the danger, the bear moves right just as they are about to shoot. They rush onto the beach, and although the bear tries to escape, Tim takes aim and fires. The bear collapses. Approaching slowly, they ensure the bear is dead. They find it's a huge bear, now lying quietly on the beach. Mike congratulates Tim on his precise shot. Now they must pull the bear from the water. Weighing 800 pounds, it takes both men to move it. They begin skinning the bear, starting from the chin to the buttocks, extending to the hind legs, and then rolling up the skin. Mike's skilled knife work impresses Tim, and soon the skin is removed and packed away. With the hunt concluded, Mike, Tim, and the dog confidently start their return journey, satisfied with their successful hunt. In the remote Ozark Mountains, Jason and Mary live a self-sufficient lifestyle with their 2 daughters, one aged 10 and the other 11 months old, who enjoy chasing chickens around. They have a new family member, Chloe, Jason's stepson from his previous marriage, who has come to learn crafts at the age of 13, an ideal time for absorbing knowledge. Today, Jason, a blacksmith, plans to build a furnace to expand his ironwork business due to the growing family. Recently, he collected iron ore from a local cave and now needs to smelt steel, requiring a high-temperature resistant furnace. Jason has constructed a basic wooden frame for the furnace, which is temporary. Mary prepares a homemade mixture of 70% sand and 30% clay with some moss to cover the frame, creating a solid bond. After tightly wrapping the clay around the wooden frame, it needs to be baked to draw out moisture. Mary teaches the technique, emphasizing the removal of all air bubbles to prevent explosions when heated, which could damage the structure. The clay structure is nearly finished when the weather suddenly changes, and a rapid temperature drop suggests an approaching storm. Normally, the furnace would need 48 hours to air dry, but rain disrupts this plan. Reluctantly, Jason decides to heat it directly to speed up drying. He ignites the surrounding wood with a blowtorch, aiming for even heating. If the clay is heated too quickly, it can damage the structure. Despite a smooth start, a loud crack soon indicates that the furnace's base has developed a crack. Realizing their actions were too abrupt, Jason and Mary see more cracks forming. Jason retrieves some wood to try to manage the situation. Mary, observing, notes that only the outer plaster has cracked, not compromising the structure's integrity. After burning for 3 hours, the cracks have not worsened. Jason proceeds by stuffing charcoal inside the furnace to burn the wooden frame from within, adding more wood to intensify the fire. An explosion soon startles them, caused by trapped air bubbles in the clay. Jason is reassured seeing his son busy and the furnace evolving towards perfection. The next day, they're ready to experiment. They crush iron ore, mix the powder with charcoal at a 1-to-1 ratio, and add it to the burning furnace. The carbon from the charcoal binds with the oxygen to extract impurities from the ore. Jason monitors oxygen intake to keep the furnace temperature at 2,000 degrees, observing the smelting process through a hole. After 6 hours of smelting, they reach the final stage. If successful, they will produce a soft, refined block of iron ore. However, extracting impurities quickly is crucial. If not done within seconds as the temperature drops, the smelting will fail. Jason opens a gap for impurities to flow out like lava, but the slag does not move. In desperation, he tries to clear the blockage caused by a large piece of ore. After various attempts, some viscous liquid trickles out. At a critical moment, Jason dismantles the furnace, but only a large chunk of residue rolls out. Despite his efforts to break it down, the high impurity content indicates his failure. The effort, for now, has been in vain. In the mountains of Montana, a man named Jack, a lion hunter responsible for driving cougars away from ranches, has set aside his usual duties today. He ventures deep into the mountains with his shotgun for one last hunting opportunity as the season draws to a close. Jack has an advantage over others. He knows the mountain's terrain and where to find game. His target is an elk, which tends to sleep and graze at higher elevations. Jack's strategy is to start from the mountaintop and sweep downwards. His method proves effective, and he soon spots a large herd of elk. Inspired, he moves closer. Elk are about 4 times the size of regular deer, making them ideal for self-sufficient hunters. However, their size and the threat of cougars and wolves make them extremely skittish, ready to flee at any disturbance. Spotting cougar tracks in the snow, Jack realizes why the elk had descended from the mountaintop. A cougar had attacked them the previous night. Proceeding with caution, Jack crawls towards the elk. Just as he readies his shotgun, the elk sense danger and start to flee. Not wanting to miss his chance, Jack fires but misses. Quickly reloading, he notices a few confident elk have not fled. Seizing the opportunity, his next shot successfully brings down one of the elk. The rest of the herd then scatters. Jack approaches the fallen elk, which can provide 400 pounds of meat. He hurries to butcher it, aware that the scent of blood could attract cougars. He cuts off the elk's thighs and tenderloin, planning to carry the meat back to his truck in 2 trips. With daylight fading and night, a time when predators are more active, approaching, Jack decides to hang the meat in a tree to get through the night. Returning for the second batch of meat as dusk falls, Jack hangs it alongside the first batch. He then sets up a tent nearby and starts a fire. After a busy day, he is famished, and the fresh elk meat provides a perfect dinner. However, just as he begins to relax, he hears a noise nearby. Grabbing his shotgun, he checks the meat in the tree, finding it undisturbed. After surveying the area with his flashlight and finding nothing, Jack returns to camp to add more wood to the fire. Despite his firearms, he knows the fire is crucial for defense against predators. After a tense night, Jack prepares to transport the meat back to his truck, parked 6 miles away. Carrying 200 pounds of meat is challenging and is made more difficult by a sudden storm that reduces visibility and drastically drops temperatures. Concerned about potential wildlife encounters, Jack quickens his pace. After delivering the first batch of meat to his truck, he faces the return journey for the second batch, which takes much longer than expected. Exhausted but determined to reach his truck before dark, Jack takes a risky shortcut through dangerous terrain. He successfully navigates several hazards until only one obstacle remains, a steep cliff below which his truck is parked. Removing his backpack and throwing it down lightens his load and simplifies the climb. Carefully, he climbs down, retrieves his backpack, and jogs to his truck. Jack's hunting trip ends perfectly as he reaches his truck, marking a successful conclusion to his challenging adventure. This is a villa located in Alaska where the Morgans live. They have 5 horses and 3 dogs. Since Morgan arrived here alone 5 years ago, he has developed the homestead into a self-sufficient residence, attracting a woman to share his life with. Last summer, they even bought a used airplane, greatly improving their lifestyle. They also upgraded their indoor water system. Previously, they fetched water from a stream, but during the harsh winters, it became a struggle. So, they dug a well under their homestead and installed a pressurized water system. However, today, no water is coming out. Morgan went under the house to a 6-foot deep pit. When he removed the wooden cover, he found that the water level had dropped by 3 feet. He guessed that with the onset of winter, the stream had frozen over, depleting the underground water supply. The well was dug in summer, and now he needed to dig it deeper. To prevent debris from falling into the well, he built a wooden frame around the inside of the well mouth and used a shovel to remove some stones that had fallen in. After a few shovelfuls, he found a large rock blocking further progress. Meanwhile, Marg braved a blizzard to go to the stream because the house had run out of water. She needed to collect some, but the deep snow made the short journey extremely difficult. Instead, she decided not to move forward and simply shoveled some snow to melt for fresh water. She loaded as much snow as possible onto the sled and returned home. However, she knew this was not a long-term solution. Back at the well, Morgan exerted great effort and finally managed to lift the large rock out. With the rock removed, he was able to clear a 2-foot deep space, making the well deep enough for use. Marg handed him a pipe, which Morgan connected to the bottom. They were now ready to test the results. Marg pumped the handle a few times, and murky well water emerged, which soon cleared up, indicating their success. 2 men grabbed the deer's hide and pulled it down forcefully, stripping it off in one go. The fresh deer meat was then made into a delicious dinner. This took place in the Blue Ridge Mountains. The story begins earlier in the day. Eustace and his apprentice, Raleigh, were hunting in the deep mountains to gather food for the winter. 3 weeks prior, a rare blizzard had swept through the area, damaging crops and reducing the year's harvest. To prevent future shortages, Eustace needed to gather meat. Soon, they found fresh signs of a buck rubbing its antlers against trees, marking its territory. Raleigh studied the marks and confirmed they were fresh, indicating the buck was nearby. Sure enough, they soon spotted their target in a valley below. Eustace quietly raised his rifle, but the deer sensed danger and ran off, causing them to miss their chance. Frustrated, they mounted their horses and continued searching. The forest was large and populated with many animals, and it wasn't long before they spotted another deer. They tied their horses to a tree and approached on foot. Hiding behind a large tree, they saw a deer looking curiously in their direction. Eustace took out his rifle and aimed. The deer, still curious, was met with a hot bullet. Startled, it desperately ran away. Eustace was confident he had hit the target. Despite adrenaline causing a wounded deer to still move, it was unusual for one to run so vigorously. Following the blood trail, they eventually found the deer dead at a considerable distance. Following local tradition, Eustace smeared blood on his temples, a high honor given to the prey, thanking it for its sacrifice. After performing this sacred ritual, they dragged the deer back home and hung it on a rack. Eustace began by cutting the skin from the deer's chest upwards and around its neck. Then, both men pulled down the fur. They cut the tenderloin from the deer to prepare for dinner. Adding various side dishes to the venison enhanced the flavor. As the tempting aroma filled the air, they couldn't wait any longer. Eustace took a bite and declared that such flavor must be heavenly, rarely experienced on Earth. They ate heartily, thoroughly enjoying their meal. A horse whinnied and rolled down a snowy hill, startling its owners. This occurred in Idaho's Sawtooth Mountains. Harry and Kid were preparing supplies, including sugar, coffee beans, rice, and other staples because they had taken a job delivering winter supplies to remote areas. Today, they were headed to a camp deep in the mountains. Success would earn them $500 and potentially open up a continuous stream of orders, so they took this mission very seriously. The team set out, using horses as the best means of transportation in mountainous terrain. Trained to carry 100 pounds each, the horses struggled on the slippery, snow-covered trails. An accident occurred when one horse's front leg got caught in its reins. Harry carefully freed it, but another horse suddenly rolled down, giving them a fright. After unloading the supplies, the horse stood up, seemingly unharmed, and they continued on their way. However, they soon stopped again at a bloody site on the snow, indicating a recent wolf kill with leftovers suggesting the wolves might return. To avoid trouble, they decided to move quickly away from the area and continued until they reached a forest. As dusk approached, they planned to spend the night there, keeping a bonfire lit all night to deter wolves. Harry checked on each horse while they enjoyed their dinner around the fire. By dawn, ready to leave, they chose a shortcut to save time. However, they soon realized the path was difficult, filled with obstacles that slowed them down, jeopardizing their schedule to reach the destination by night. In their haste, the young horse that had slipped earlier fell again. Fortunately, it wasn't injured, but it was clear it couldn't continue. They left it behind with a fire lit by Kid to keep wolves away until they could return. The rest of the team pressed on and finally arrived at the wolf hunters' camp in the evening, successfully delivering the supplies. They immediately began their journey back and found the young horse safe at dusk, much to their relief. An airplane flew over the Alaska range with the Morgans aboard, seeking areas dense with spruce trees. Their hunting had failed twice this year, leaving them without extra meat for the long winter. Their only option was to sell furs to earn money for food. They ventured into unfamiliar territory, potentially rich in fur. Before exploring, they had to protect their plane from the very low temperatures that could freeze the engine, trapping them. Morgan inserted a heater into the engine cover and insulated it with cotton fabric. After checking their guns, they skied into the woods, identifying it as an ideal spot for setting traps for valuable animals like foxes, wolverines, and lynxes, whose furs could fetch up to $500 each. Over the past 2 years, the Morgans had run a trap line near their homestead. Despite some success, they were still novices, learning through trial and error. Morgan constructed a path with branches and set a large animal trap, handling it cautiously each time due to its size and danger. He then used a ptarmigan carcass as bait, attracting predators. Now, they set other traps, finding a perfect spot along an animal trail. Using local materials, they secured traps with steel wires, ensuring double protection with bait in the middle. After 4 hours of work and with daylight dwindling, they decided to head home. Back at the plane, they found the heater had run out and the engine was cool. They hurried to start the plane, but the engine wouldn't start at first due to frost buildup. After clearing the frost and trying again, the engine started, and they headed home, planning to check the traps in a few days. A week later, Morgan returned, hopeful despite living off potatoes and carrots due to the failed hunting season. He needed the fur sales to buy food. Before checking the traps, he secured the plane against Alaska's unpredictable weather by digging a hole in the snow, burying a log, and tying it to the plane as an anchor. He then checked about 30 traps set within a 4-mile radius, targeting minks, wolverines, and lynxes. The first trap was empty, but he reset it and moved on. The next was a wolverine trap that had been disturbed by a rabbit, evident from the tracks and droppings inside the trap. This was promising since rabbits attract lynxes, a main prey. After checking several traps with no catches, his disappointment was evident. But perseverance paid off when the next trap contained a mink, worth $100. This was his first income of the year and a hopeful sign for the future. As dusk fell, Morgan accepted the reality that, aside from the mink, he had caught nothing else. He found another mink in the final trap, a small but positive sign that covered his fuel costs and hinted at a promising future. Now it was time to head home. This is a young adult beaver, notable for its attractive and sharp incisors, making it a standout in the beaver world. Unfortunately, it was caught by a hunter before it could enjoy true happiness. Tom spent 2 weeks helping his brother move, during which his apprentice Sean managed the trap line and caught 6 beavers. Now, Tom has a lot of work ahead of him, especially as beaver prices have recently risen in the market. Beaver glands, used in perfume making, can sell for $50 due to their distinctive scent. Tom is an artist who can repurpose every part of a beaver. For example, he can make knife sheaths from the tails, and the fur can sell for $200. Altogether, one beaver can bring in about $400. Skinning a beaver perfectly is challenging because the skin is tightly attached to the fat, and any holes can have the fur's value. However, Tom's skilled hands effortlessly skin the beaver. He then cuts out the glands, which release a chemical called castoreum used by beavers to mark their territory. Tom proceeds to work on the beaver's tail, trimming the edges with scissors and then opening it from the middle. Just then, Sean enters with new catches, including a weasel and a sun-tanned beaver pelt. Sean has learned leatherworking from Tom and tried it himself with decent results, earning Tom's generous praise, which makes Sean blush. Tom, holding the pristine fur of the weasel, a favorite among women, notes that both weasels and minks are carnivores. The best bait for trapping them is meat, which they just happen to have from the beaver. They cut some meat from the beaver, which can attract a mink that could fetch $100, potentially increasing by $50 with Tom's craftsmanship. Now, with enough bait prepared, Sean sets out to lay traps while Tom stays home to craft. He uses deer sinew as thread to sew the beaver tail into a knife sheath, aiming for an authentic look. For the interior of the sheath, he uses elk skin. After sewing, Tom finishes the edges, designing them to channel away rain and keep the sheath dry. He then tests the sheath with a small knife, and it looks very good. Under this tree, an animal carcass was buried. Jack pulled it out and discovered it was a deer, likely buried by a cougar not far from a ranch, just 200 yards away. Jack came here for this cougar after receiving an urgent call from a rancher that morning. He rushed to the ranch located in southwestern Montana, where many cattle and sheep live, valuable assets to the rancher. Recently, a cougar had been causing fear among the livestock. After saying goodbye to the rancher, Jack patrolled the area and soon found the deer's body. The burial method looked familiar to Jack, reminding him of an encounter a few weeks ago, possibly with the same cougar. Now it was time for the hounds, with their sharp sense of smell, to take over. They could pick up the lingering scent in the air. They crossed the ranch and reached the snowy foothills, which were covered with cougar tracks. The two hounds became excited, but Jack did not release them yet. He noticed something troubling. There were tracks from two cougars, and their tail movement suggested they were a mating pair, which are the most challenging to handle. Despite the complexity, Jack had to proceed. He unleashed the hounds to track them, following closely behind. The hounds headed towards the mountain peak, and Jack struggled to keep up on the mountainous terrain. As he neared the peak, he heard the hounds barking. They had cornered the cougar. When he arrived, he saw a young female cougar trapped up a tree. The cougar became even more frightened upon seeing Jack and climbed higher. Jack recognized the tension in the cougar and realized it was the same female from weeks ago. For some reason, she had returned, a rare occurrence. Now 12 miles from the ranch, the area was sufficiently safe. Jack called the hounds down and tried to find the other cougar. To prevent further disturbances at the ranch, he needed to drive both cougars back into the mountains simultaneously. The young female's repeated approaches to the ranch were unusual and suspicious. Jack prepared to investigate this strange behavior further. This time, he brought 3 hounds to the forested mountains. On the snowy ground, he found a trail of fresh cougar prints. The cougar had returned, failing to learn from previous encounters, likely due to a compelling reason. The hounds, picking up the scent, began climbing the mountain. Soon, Jack came upon a kill site where the cougar had slain a deer, surrounded by chaotic tracks. Among them, Jack spotted the tracks of a cub. Realizing the mother cougar must be raising young ones here, which explained her return after being driven away. To resolve the issue, Jack knew he had to drive the entire family deep into the mountains. The mother's determination to protect her cubs was unquestionable, and a fierce confrontation with the hounds was likely. Jack quickly ran to support the hounds. 3 hours later, he was still struggling to climb the rocky terrain, which the cougar had chosen for its escape. The steep and slippery rocks made the climb arduous, and a fall could have disastrous consequences. After much effort, Jack reached the summit, only to face another challenge, a vertical cliff about 2 meters high. He could hear the hounds below. After a moment's hesitation, he jumped down from the cliff, fortunately without injury. Picking up his fallen hat, he rushed towards the hounds, saving time by running and sliding. Finally arriving at the destination, he found the hounds barking continuously. Jack immediately spotted a small cub perched on a branch, trembling with fear and longing for its mother. However, it didn't need to return home, as its mother was hiding in higher branches, with another cub in a different tree. The family of 3 was caught in the act. The 2 cubs trembled and pitifully looked at Jack. Jack believed that after this expulsion, these cougars would not dare return. Now that his mission was accomplished, Jack was ready to take the hounds home. Morgan, carrying a few antlers and some furs, was ready to head into town. After a failed hunting season and unsuccessful trapping, he and his wife faced unprecedented hardship. Their food supply was insufficient for the winter. The nearest town, Tarkatina, was 500 miles away. Crossing the daunting mountains was a challenge, especially for Morgan, who had only been flying for a year. Fortunately, the weather was clear today, and he safely arrived over the small town, home to just 1,000 people. To Morgan, who had lived in the wilderness for 5 years, this place felt like a big city. He was somewhat socially anxious and wanted to finish his business quickly and return home. At the airport, there was a shared car service. Morgan loaded the antlers and fur onto a truck and went to the trading spot. He had arranged to meet a local fur trader there. After greeting each other, Morgan began to display his goods. He showed small moose antlers and one particularly large one. The fur trader's serious poker face made it hard for Morgan to tell if he appreciated the items. Morgan then presented 2 mink furs, flawlessly prepared, each worth $150. He hoped to sell everything for $800, but the trader offered only $500. Dissatisfied, Morgan bargained, and they finally agreed on $600. Although it wasn't much, it was enough to address Morgan's immediate needs. He bought some meat and food at the store and hurried to his plane, planning to leave before dark. He loaded the supplies onto the plane and called Marg to check the weather back home, but received bad news about strong winds, forcing him to stay overnight. The next day, after calling Marg again and learning that the weather had improved, Morgan took off. However, the flight was not smooth. He had to fly over towering ice mountains, and flying over them always made Morgan feel insignificant. Alaska's unpredictable weather soon brought strong turbulence, shaking the plane violently. Morgan struggled to control the aircraft, slowly decreasing altitude to avoid the air currents. With jagged peaks on both sides, he had to skillfully navigate through the narrow valleys. Carefully managing the controls, he eventually flew past the mountainous area. The rest of the journey went smoothly, and he successfully landed on the runway. It felt good to be home, and he had successfully resolved their food shortage. This trip was well worth it. Eustace hunted a deer and sliced a prime cut of meat directly from it. Without washing it, he cut it into slices, fried it with side dishes in an iron pot, and enjoyed the natural flavor of the food. Both men had a fulfilling meal. After eating, it was time to work. Eustace and Raleigh inspected a new forest area on the 90-acre land Eustace bought last year, making only a down payment and paying in installments. Soon, they saw a straight, tall tree but also discovered a bad sign: animal intestines on the ground, indicating someone had been hunting on Eustace's land. Furious, Eustace faced ongoing troubles with the land, including finding a moonshine setup 3 weeks ago, which he destroyed with dynamite. Now, a poacher had appeared, which was unacceptable. From the tracks, the poacher had driven a truck onto the property. At the gate, Eustace saw the chain was cut, confirming the premeditated poaching. He locked the gate again and continued patrolling, finding a base with fresh beer bottles left by partygoers in an old trailer from the previous owner, at the edge of the new land. Eustace hadn't noticed this before. Now, he had to address these issues. He spray-painted the trailer to indicate rejection and planned to build a cabin nearby to deter intruders and assert private property rights. They needed to clear a space, cutting down large trees in the area, teaching an apprentice in the process. One tree was rotted and unusable for lumber, so it was cut for firewood. Raleigh loaded all the wood into the truck, clearing the space. Now they could start building the house. A herd of American bison was fleeing, chased by a hunter on horseback who held the reins in one hand and a pistol in the other. The hunt was underway in the jagged Rocky Mountains, a wild, untamed area. Brothers Harry and Kid were there to stock up on food for the winter. They had entered the territory of the bison, the largest mammals in America. Everywhere on the ground were hoof prints leading them to a running herd, a stunning sight. The brothers were puzzled by the bison's frantic behavior, jokingly wondering if it was some sort of bison sports day. Concerned the bison might escape too far, they decided to launch a full attack. The chase was on. Harry led, aiming to disrupt the herd, while Kid picked out a target. The bison were fast, and catching up was no easy task. Harry urged his horse to speed up, eventually becoming one with it. They were now only 5 lengths behind a few bison. Seizing the moment, Harry did not hesitate. He pulled out a pistol and closed the distance. With one shot, a bull bison fell. Up close, it appeared massive, weighing at least half a ton, providing plenty of beef. Since the bison fell on a slope, they needed to reposition it before butchering to prevent contamination from organs and blood, which could breed bacteria. With only a few hours left until dark, they had to hurry up with the dissection. Harry, with a sharp knife, started cutting from the belly, while Kid went back to bring more horses. By the time Kid returned, Harry had finished processing the bison. They packed the choice cuts, about 2/3 of the body, onto several horses since one horse alone couldn't manage the load. They also took the bison hide, which could fetch $500 after tanning, and packed it on the horses along with the bison head. The brothers were ready to head home, their hunt securing 6 months' worth of meat, a successful expedition indeed. They were building a small cabin in the woods to deter intruders from entering their territory. The foundation was already set, and they planned to use thick wooden planks for the walls, each weighing about 200 pounds. Using tools, they moved the planks forward by rotating them, but even that was exhausting. The ends of the planks needed dovetail grooves to lock the logs together. This method, which used dovetail joints, was simple and practical, securing the logs without any nails. After taking turns to work, they had carved out the dovetail grooves. They placed the planks, fitting the joints tightly together. Using this method, they completed the first layer of the wall. However, as the wall grew taller, lifting the heavy planks became increasingly difficult. One plank even damaged a corner of the groove below when it fell. They decided to use a secret weapon, a bulldozer borrowed from a neighbor. Although Eustace was a master of primitive tools, he had never used such a machine before. After some experimentation, Eustace felt confident in operating it. Raleigh attached a metal chain to the bulldozer's shovel at one end and to the plank at the other. The bulldozer began to lift the plank as the chain tightened, raising it swiftly. Eustace stopped the machine, holding the plank mid-air. Raleigh easily adjusted its position. Eustace then lowered it slowly to lock the dovetail joints together. Raleigh adjusted the other end into place. Their first attempt was a success, which delighted them both. With the help of the machine, they could work much more efficiently. The wall continued to rise with their teamwork. However, one plank was not placed accurately, so Raleigh asked Eustace to lift it again. Unfortunately, accidents happen unexpectedly. The plank snapped down, trapping Raleigh's hand and causing him severe pain. Eustace rushed over to check. Raleigh's hand was bleeding, and he couldn't make a fist. They had to rush to the hospital. X-rays showed a fractured bone, but no surgery was needed, just 3 to 6 weeks of rest. This was a setback, as the work now fell entirely on Eustace. This was the process of smelting steel. After burning intensely for 6 hours, they dismantled the furnace and obtained a large chunk of iron. However, due to too many impurities, their efforts were in vain. This setback deeply affected Jason. A few days later, having adjusted his mindset, Jason resumed work. He wanted to make knives and needed steel, but without raw materials, he was forced to search for discarded steel in the woods. Long ago, he had found a plowing tool here. It was too heavy to retrieve at the time, so he left it. Today, equipped with tools, Jason returned to collect it. The plow lay beyond a ditch, a mile into the woods. It appeared unchanged. The plow wheel was made of high-carbon steel, ideal for creating sharp blades. Jason used a blowtorch on the front joint, softening the steel with continuous high heat. He then easily separated the parts with a hammer. As he prepared to cut the wheel's connection, the blowtorch failed after just 10 minutes. Both acetylene tanks were empty. Facing this issue, Jason resorted to traditional methods. He took out a steel saw and began cutting at the bolts. This method was slow, requiring constant friction. After cutting halfway, he used a hammer to forcibly break the bolts, striking them about a dozen times before they came off. Although this deviated from his original plan, he had no choice but to drag the small assembly home. Dragging it on flat ground was challenging, but it did not stop Jason. He moved quickly through the woods. However, difficulties arose on an uphill path where the 200-pound scrap felt like a ton. Jason's face turned red as he struggled uphill, followed by a downhill path where the load closely followed him. He had to focus his strength on his calves. Enduring this torment, Jason reached the final and steepest part of the journey. After a brief rest, he gritted his teeth and began climbing, making his way upwards with great effort. Finally, he reached his motorcycle. The rest was easier. He tied the plow wheel to the bike with a chain and then left. Now he could restart his forging work. Harry hunted a bison, providing 6 months' worth of meat and solving their food problem. This allowed the brothers to focus on work. Today, they arrived at the river with 5 dogs, planning to float downstream in search of undeveloped land. With spring approaching, it also marked the start of the cattle raising season. The brothers worked for several ranchers and were now looking for quality pastures for the upcoming cattle season, where they would herd over 1,000 cattle together. After traveling a distance, they spotted a broken boat on the shore. The area's beauty could attract tourists, but after the ice melted, the river would become very turbulent. The boat's owner was likely in grave danger, a thought that weighed heavily on their minds and served as a reminder never to underestimate nature's force. They carefully rowed the boat, feeling it become increasingly difficult to control due to many tributaries flowing into the river, strengthening the current. The roaring sound ahead prompted them to dock early and check the situation. They found the water extremely rough, resembling a fierce tiger escaping its cage. To reach their idyllic destination, they had to overcome this challenge. Kid, an expert rower, decided to tackle the dangerous waters alone, while Harry and the dogs stayed on shore. Facing the rapids was terrifying. The boat was tossed around like a leaf, constantly hitting rocks. Harry watched anxiously, sweating for his brother. Kid struggled but eventually safely crossed this section of the river. However, more dangerous waters lay ahead. The brothers regrouped but could not find a better route. They had no choice but to push through, with Kid feeling the boat could capsize at any moment. All he could do was maintain balance and hope for the best. Fortunately, he was lucky and safely passed this stretch. They advanced another 4 miles, then found a wide section of the river and built a campfire on the shore where they would spend the night. A bear broke out from the encirclement of 5 hunting dogs, just 3 meters away from a hunter, leading to a life-or-death struggle. The encounter was sudden. Harry and Kid were searching for a quality pasture and had left the riverside at dawn to head towards the mountaintop. They climbed steep paths to the ridge, where they were greeted with a surprisingly vast area, perfect for grazing 1,000 cattle on at least 2,000 acres. While they studied the terrain, the hunting dogs scouted the area, seemingly loving the land. However, the brothers' expressions changed when they found a bear's footprint, indicating a nearby bear's presence, which alarmed them as the dogs could be easily killed if they encountered the bear alone. Suddenly, the dogs started barking, and the brothers spotted a fleeing black bear, triggering a hunt. They ran down the mountain, with the younger Harry quickly outpacing his brother. Sensing danger, the bear hurriedly fled, but empowered by their owner's pursuit, the dogs, as if on adrenaline, relentlessly bit at the bear's rear. This angered the bear, yet it dared not stop, fearing the distant hunters more than the dogs. Due to taking a shortcut, the distance between them closed rapidly. Harry and Kid were anxious, fearing they might lose 1 or 2 dogs if they didn't provide support quickly. If the bear chose to climb a tree, the chase could have ended peacefully, but it kept running. Harry tried to stop the dogs, but their adrenaline was high, and they wanted to fight the bear. Even the swift river couldn't stop them. The intensity escalated when one dog was slapped by the bear. The others, feeling a strong bond, could not let the bear go. Now, Harry looked fierce and decided to resolve the conflict with his gun, firing 2 shots that ended the bear's life. They couldn't let the bear meat go to waste, so they skinned the bear and cut off some meat, then returned to the riverside to enjoy the grilled meat. Next, they planned to bring the cattle herd to this area. These are high-quality charcoal pieces primarily used for blacksmithing. Today, Jason is teaching his 13-year-old son, Chloe, his first blacksmithing lesson. He holds an old knife with a story. It was a gift given to his father, who had lived in Vietnam for 7 years with the military and some local Vietnamese people. They plan to forge a new knife based on this cleverly designed one. The material comes from a plow wheel Jason brought back last week. 1 steel rod from it is enough for their needs. Jason cuts it in half with a cutter, then heats the scrap steel in the furnace until it glows red. He and his son take turns hammering it. Steel can be reshaped at high temperatures, but any deformation on the sides needs to be corrected promptly. This is a time-consuming and patience-testing process that involves continuous heating and hammering until the steel takes the shape of a knife blade. The tip of the blade is almost ready. Next, Jason begins to work on the handle. Seeing his son idle, he asks him to operate the manual bellows, which generates a strong airflow to intensify the furnace's flames. The steel quickly heats up again, and they resume their alternating hammer strikes. However, a crack develops at the end of the handle, threatening to ruin the forging. Jason meticulously cleans the steel knife of impurities while Chloe fetches a flux tool, a staple in the steel industry containing borax to remove any impurities. They apply it to the crack, and under high heat, it helps the metal to fuse back together. At a critical moment, Jason hammers rhythmically and vigorously, ultimately fixing the flaw in the handle, a testament to an old blacksmith's skill. The next step is quenching. They plunge the hot steel into oil to rapidly cool and harden its molecular structure, making the blade strong. This also serves as a test for hidden defects, which could cause the blade to crack during cooling. Fortunately, this quenching process goes smoothly. Jason quickly grinds off the residue left by the quenching. The next step is to fit a handle made from local walnut wood, secured with a copper ring. After assembly, a beautiful and sharp knife is born. Jason uses it to cut chicken, and the results are impressively good. Chloe looks on with admiration. Tonight, the family will celebrate with some roasted chicken, enjoying the fruits of their labor. An elk carcass appeared on the land newly purchased by Tom, likely the work of a group of coyotes. Typically, coyotes do not prey on large animals like elk, indicating that the coyotes in this area of Montana's Yaak Valley are unusually aggressive. Since acquiring the land, Sean has been operating a trap line, which has been successful so far. However, the appearance of coyotes poses a new challenge, as these cunning predators usually prey on smaller animals and might steal trapped game or scare off local wildlife. After inspecting the elk carcass, they decided to manage the coyote population by setting traps nearby. They found an animal trail and hung a snare trap in the air, designed to catch a coyote by the neck as it passes. They set up 2 of these visible traps, but knowing coyotes' craftiness, they realized these might not be sufficient. Therefore, Tom decided to place a foothold trap in the area. With little snow on the ground, it was best to bury the trap in the soil, covered with wax paper to prevent dirt from freezing and jamming the trap spring, which could render it ineffective. After camouflaging the trap, Tom used a bottle of coyote urine as bait. The unfamiliar scent would surely attract local coyotes to investigate. With the hidden trap set, they could now return home and wait. The next day, Tom and Sean returned to the trap site and found no change, which left them somewhat disappointed, confirming the coyote's cunning nature. They then checked the second trap, and upon arriving, Sean burst into laughter as they had caught a coyote. Approaching, they found it was an adult, tightly snared by the neck. Carrying this coyote, they headed to the third trap, where they captured another. Catching 2 coyotes was sure to impact the pack, likely causing the rest to flee. Tom planned to turn these captures into profit. He sharpened his knife before beginning to skin one of the coyotes, starting at the toes of the front legs to preserve the fur's integrity. Unlike other hunters who might chop off the toes, damaging the valuable fur, Tom was meticulous to avoid this. Soon, he had processed all 4 paws and began skinning the full pelt. Over 24 hours had passed since the catch, and with bacteria possibly rotting the fur, Tom hastened his work. After some time, he successfully removed the pelt and repeated the process with the second coyote, which is not detailed here. Next, Tom needed to scrape off any remaining fat from the pelt to prevent bacterial growth. Then came the soaking step. Using a traditional method, he used brain matter, which contains natural oils that soften and make the fibers more flexible. He mixed this with water, heated it, and stirred until the mixture turned from pink to milky white. He then applied this mixture to every corner of the fur with a brush, a technique dating back to the Stone Age and widely used by Native American tribes. With the fur fully treated and drying, Tom also turned the coyote's skull into an art piece. He cooked the skull to remove all flesh, then placed it in borax to slowly absorb moisture. Meanwhile, the fur underwent its final step, stretching to soften the fibers. After numerous stretches, the fur whitened, indicating it was fully dry. Tom turned the pelt over, completing a perfect wolf pelt that could sell for up to $1,000 to the right buyer. Jason's first attempt at smelting steel ended in failure, wasting much time and effort, which left him feeling frustrated. Now he was ready for a second try. This time he designed the furnace to be half its original size and included a door blocked by a brick for easily removing slag at critical moments. Unlike the first attempt, where he risked using valuable iron ore, Jason opted for cheaper scrap metal. He planned to add iron rods progressively, allowing each to melt before adding the next. The longer the metal cooked, the more carbon it absorbed from the charcoal, increasing its ductility. However, he had to be careful not to overcook it, as excessive time could make the steel too brittle to hold an edge. After the furnace produced a batch of molten iron, Jason cooled it in water. The initial inspection with a cutter revealed a fracture resembling high-carbon steel but with some porosity, suggesting it might have been cooked too long. Undeterred, Jason began a second test, this time confident in his ability to produce steel. He added much charcoal and alternated between inserting iron rods and adding more charcoal, continuously stirring to ensure thorough melting and mixing of iron and carbon. After some time, feeling the moment was right, Jason removed the glowing hot brick and scooped out a mixture of iron from the furnace, quickly cooling it in water. The piece looked solid and heavy, indicating success. He repeatedly brushed the iron block, which showed few air pockets and was very dense, a sure sign of high-carbon steel. Jason's mood brightened significantly, ready to start real smelting. He meticulously maintained a 2-to-1 ratio of carbon to iron, ideal for forging blades. Using his own homemade charcoal, if he could successfully turn iron ore into steel, it would signify self-sufficiency as a blacksmith, potentially saving thousands of dollars annually and offering a chance to prosper. However, an unexpected issue occurred when the brick got stuck. With no time to lose, Jason stirred from above with an iron rod, located the block of iron, and extracted it with pliers. He quickly hammered the steel, which felt solid and dense under the hammer. A perfect piece of steel was indeed obtained. Now, his blacksmithing career was set to advance to the next level. This couple lives a fairy tale life in the wilderness. Of Alaska. Today, they prepare to explore an unknown body of water and do some fishing to cultivate their spirits. They packed their bags, took a shotgun, and set off with their 2 dogs. Morgan had spotted this water area while flying over it. Since they were unsure of the route, they checked the map as they progressed and regularly marked their path to prevent getting lost, a useful survival tip. While passing a large tree, Morgan noticed some bear hair. Each year at this time, grizzly bears, hungry from hibernation, pose a potential danger, so the couple needed to remain alert. However, they were not afraid as their well-trained dogs would alert them to any nearby bears. Marg walked ahead and suddenly stopped. A grouse was perched on a tree ahead. Seizing the opportunity, Morgan quickly raised his gun and shot the grouse accurately, securing their dinner. He stuffed the grouse into his backpack and loaded another bullet into his shotgun, ready to shoot at any moment. Continuing their journey, they soon reached the river, which was low and clear. Deciding to camp nearby, they eagerly started fishing, hoping to catch some trout which could improve their meals and possibly become a sustainable food source. Unfortunately, after 2 hours of fishing without even a nibble, they felt quite discouraged. With night approaching, they began to prepare for the evening. Marg collected some dry twigs for firewood, while Morgan cleared a space under a large tree. As the sun set, they lit a campfire. Just as they were about to prepare dinner, the dogs began barking incessantly in one direction. Morgan became alert, suspecting a bear might be nearby. Perhaps intimidated by the dogs barking, the bear withdrew, and the dogs calmed down, allowing dinner to proceed as planned. Morgan roasted the grouse over the charcoal fire. Although they hadn't caught any fish, living a different kind of life was also a great adventure. They looked forward to trying their luck at fishing again tomorrow. As the sun rose, the couple woke up from their camping spot, ready to take advantage of the early morning, a prime time for fishing. They returned to the river and decided to split up to increase their chances of success. Morgan soon found a deep spot, about 6 feet deep, a likely habitat for big fish. With anticipation, he began fishing using artificial lures, mimicking the movements of small fish to attract larger ones. As time ticked by, Morgan repeated his motions until a smile appeared on his face. It seemed a fish had bitten. He felt a strong pull, indicating a large fish. Using his skilled techniques, he tried to wear down the fish's strength with controlled slack, but unfortunately, he lost the fish as it slipped off the hook. Disappointed and empty-handed, Morgan sighed deeply, reflecting his frustration, while the dogs quietly observed, sensing their master's mood. Meanwhile, Morgan placed his hopes on his wife, Marg, who at that moment had a fish on the line. The rod bent dramatically, signaling a large catch. After a strenuous struggle, she managed to pull the fish ashore and killed it with a rock, a promising start to their day. Inspired, Marg felt like she had gained a level in fishing, understanding the techniques better. She kept the lure active, making it resemble a swimming fish, and soon caught a second trout, the very type they were hoping to find. This river could become a reliable food source for them. Marg's confidence grew as she continued to fish, successfully catching trout one after another. By the time Morgan found her, she had already caught 5 fish. He was astounded by her success, especially when one fish fell into the water, but fortunately did not escape as it was already dead. Marg graciously offered the fish to Morgan, pretending he had caught it. Embarrassed, Morgan explained that he had almost caught a fish but let it get away. With their spirits lifted, the couple set off on their journey back home, pleased with the day's outcomes. The moment the plank fell, it trapped Raleigh's hand, causing him pain. 2 weeks have passed since the accident, and Raleigh has returned to work, but his hand still cannot exert much force. However, the construction of the cabin must continue, as it is crucial for deterring poachers. With a shortage of manpower, Eustace called in some helpers, Preston's sons. Today's task is to build the house walls using thick logs. The logs need to be sawed into planks, each 16 feet long, 5 inches thick, and 12 centimeters wide. First, they must trim the waste from the edges of the logs. Only then can they obtain the perfect planks. Each log yields 2 planks. Due to the log's thickness, the cutting machine couldn't split them in one go. They had to gradually split the logs using wedges. Together, they carried the planks to the truck. With teamwork, they produced 12 planks in 2 hours. Now it was time to head to the cabin. Upon arrival, they unloaded the planks and began carving dovetail joints for assembly. Everyone was busy with the work, and the joints were quickly completed. Eustace, operating the excavator, lifted the first plank. Being cautious due to the previous accident, everyone was careful. They aligned the plank with the joint and set it in place. As they were lifting the second plank, someone suddenly screamed. Startled, Eustace quickly inquired what was wrong. It turned out there was a hydraulic oil leak from the excavator pouring out from a loose tube. After a quick inspection, they tightened the screws with a wrench, stopping the oil leak. Work resumed, and the wooden walls gradually rose. They successfully positioned the last plank, and Eustace was thrilled. This was the quickest structure he had ever built. The only task left was the roof. But as it was getting late, they decided to continue another day. This type of mink, with its beautiful and soft fur, is highly favored by European noblewomen. Here in Montana's Bison Valley, the trapping season has only 2 weeks left. Tom is determined to make the most of this time to maximize his income. After saying goodbye to his wife, he rode his snowmobile to a nearby mountain forest. At this time of year, minks descend from the mountains to lower terrains, so Tom set his traps where they are likely to appear. Pine marten is a good target. This winter, a marten pelt could fetch 100, and with Tom's tanning, it could sell for an additional 100. Soon, he spotted rabbit tracks on the ground, the perfect place since martens, being carnivores, eat rabbits. To set a trap, Tom first needed a slanted guide pole. He tied a log at an angle to a small tree and placed a trap on it. When a marten climbs the pole, it will hit the trigger. To lure the marten, Tom used fresh beaver meat as bait, and to prevent birds from stealing it, he covered it with foil. But there was more to do. He tied a moose hide to the trunk and sprayed it with fish oil. The key step was to light the moose hide with a lighter. The scent of the burnt hide would travel far, leading the marten straight to the deadly trap. Tom continued to the next site and quickly set up a third trap using the same method. His goal for the day was to set 10 traps. It had been years since he last used this line, and he believed the game had had enough time to repopulate. After a busy period on his way home, Tom noticed weasel tracks heading towards one of his trap boxes. Sure enough, he found a weasel trapped inside. Weasels are easy to catch. Simply placing traps along the bank usually yields results, as they do not mind human scent and are fearless. On his way back, Tom saw another weasel caught in a trap. This one a long-tailed weasel, which is quite rare. Only 1 in 10 weasels is long-tailed, and its value is significantly higher than that of the short-tailed variety. With a joyful heart, Tom returned home. Here in Kodiak Island, Alaska, a place both beautiful and dangerous, spring is approaching, and brown bears are waking from hibernation. Bear hunting guide Mike is observing their every move to track their patterns for the upcoming hunting season. Half of his annual income comes from this activity, and several hunters have already booked their slots. Before their arrival, Mike has much to do. His reputation is built on his meticulous work ethic. Legally, Mike can only hunt aggressive, large male bears because they pose a threat to other bears on the island, particularly the cubs, many of which die at their hands each year. Hunting these males helps maintain ecological balance. Soon, Mike spots another bear and, using his binoculars, realizes it's a mother bear with 2 cubs, not his intended targets. He continues on, heading toward a rocky area. Unexpectedly, his boat emits a beeping alarm, and the engine dies. Confused, Mike checks and discovers that the fuel filter is only half full, whereas it should be completely filled for the engine to run properly. Identifying the issue, he devises a solution. Fortunately, there's a water pump on board. He rigs the pump with wires to function as a fuel pump, connecting the fuel tank and filter to restore fuel flow. Mike restarts the boat, and the engine runs smoothly again. He resumes his search for male bears. Approaching the beach, he finds some bear tracks. They are at least a day old, not very fresh, but Mike decides to follow them for further exploration. The terrain is overgrown, and to avoid a sudden encounter with a brown bear, Mike stops and lies down to conduct a thorough search with his binoculars. He soon spots a bear with a long neck and ears that stick out to the sides, characteristics of a male bear. Mike notes the location. This bear will be his prime target when the hunting season begins. Now he can head home. Can you believe it? With this discarded metal, you can make a sharp knife. Raleigh sketches the shape of a knife on it and then starts the blowtorch to begin cutting the old saw blade. He quickly cuts out a rough shape. Next, he heats the metal. When heated to 1500 degrees, it becomes highly malleable and can be shaped by hammering. Raleigh's hand is still not fully healed from an injury, but wearing gloves severely hinders his work. So, he takes a risk, removes the gloves, and picks up the hammer to start a rhythmical hammering session. Having 4 years of experience, learned from the late Preston, he thinks of his mentor during the forging process. Now, the shape of the blade is nearly perfect, and it's time for quenching. Eustace brings a box of oil. The principle of quenching involves cooling the heated metal rapidly, changing its molecular structure to make it harder. However, if done too quickly, it might cause the blade to crack. Raleigh quickly submerges the blade in the oil, rhythmically moving it up and down. Once the flames die down, he examines it and finds the blade slightly warped, a disappointing and unexpected result indicating his skills need improvement. Eustace doesn't blame him, but encourages him to try again. After reheating the blade to red hot, Raleigh continues shaping it. Quenching hardens the blade's edges, and overworking it could weaken the metal. This is their only chance to salvage it. If unsuccessful, the knife will be ruined. Now feeling the pressure, Raleigh attempts a second quench, being extremely careful, and this time, it's a success. The blade reaches perfect hardness. Next, he moves on to grinding and polishing to remove slag and oil, revealing the shiny metal beneath. After fine-tuning the blade, it's time to attach the handle. Details are key to fetching a high price. Raleigh heats the end of the handle and quickly inserts it into a deer antler, an excellent material for knife handles. A knife also needs a sheath, which Eustace crafts from leather while Raleigh assembles the blade. They exchange their work, praising each other's craftsmanship. It's a powerful collaboration. Both are confident that this knife will sell for a good price. This is a special type of small boat made from buffalo hide that can also spin in place. It took only 1 day to create this boat. Tom has just finished his 40th trapping season with a fruitful harvest and finally has time to fulfill an order for a bull boat, a type of vessel once used by Native Americans. A collector has commissioned this project, offering a $2,000 payment. However, Tom needs help to complete this large order, and his friend Will is the perfect candidate. Will happily agrees to help when asked. To make the bull boat, they need certain materials. Red osier is a soft native shrub that can be bent into a circle while being durable enough to withstand the rush of river water. Conveniently, there is a red osier grove near Will's home. They need dozens of branches, each at least 7 feet long and as thick as a thumb. These branches are flexible and not easily broken. Soon, the two collect a large bundle of branches and begin their work at home. They trim off excess twigs and cut the branches to size. Now they need to weave a basket 3 feet in diameter. To keep it authentic, they use buffalo hide as rope, tying the red osier nodes tightly together. Rawhide is very tough and doesn't break easily. Next, they use 2 branches to create a 4-foot diameter circle that will form the base of the boat, tying it into the middle of the frame they just made. The next step is critical. They must bend the branches into a ring. Although the branches are flexible, they must proceed slowly to avoid snapping them under sudden pressure. Their start is rocky, with the first branch cracking. They replace it with a new one and change their strategy by setting the frame within a circle made of wooden sticks. Now, they forcefully bend these 20 branches into right angles and secure them to the top ring. Tom carefully manages the process and finally achieves a perfect frame. They then wrap the frame in buffalo hide, which not only provides excellent waterproofing, but its long hairs create drag in the water, making the boat easier to maneuver. Now that the bull boat is completed, it's time for a test. They take the boat to the river, and Tom starts the test. The results are surprisingly good, ensuring that the $2,000 payment is well earned. Shoeing a horse is not an easy task, especially with a temperamental horse that might kick you. The black horse Morgan is dealing with has a defiant look in its eyes, and it pulls him around, but he can't give up because he needs the horses to help transport materials for his next project. With spring approaching, Morgan plans to build a greenhouse to grow more vegetables. The building materials, which are quite large, are to be airdropped 6 miles away on a lake. These horses will then carry the materials. Shoeing the horses is necessary to prevent them from slipping in the snow. Morgan has finished trimming the hooves and now saddles up the horse to give it a feel of carrying a rider, something it hasn't done for months. The black horse behaves well, perhaps because a watchful dog is nearby, ready to discipline it if necessary. The horse is visibly annoyed but dares not act out. Marg rides a white horse, and both are ready for the materials to be flown in. However, plans never go as smoothly as expected, and a severe blizzard hits Alaska, covering the ground with thick snow. Not wanting to risk the horses, Morgan decides to walk to the lake. The pilot has already unloaded the materials. To transport them, Morgan rents a snowmobile from the pilot. He connects a sled to it, loads some smaller materials first, and then tackles the larger panels, which are even bigger than the snowmobile. Fortunately, Morgan has brought ratchet straps. He devises a plan to secure the panels by wrapping ratchet straps around the snowmobile and using ropes and hooks to fix them to the sled. Now ready to go, Morgan must frequently check the load due to the rough terrain to ensure the panels don't fall off. Despite his cautious approach, there is an accident. The snowmobile hits a small tree. He tries to reverse, but the heavy load makes it impossible. His only option is to clear the path, so he cuts down 2 small trees with a chainsaw. After clearing the road, he sets off again, and the rest of the journey is smooth. Once home, he unloads the materials and knows he'll need to make several more trips. After a busy period, he manages to move all the materials into his yard. Once the greenhouse is built, it will provide a rich supply of vegetables, advancing his self-sufficient lifestyle. The construction of the outpost cabin has finally reached its final stage. Only the roof is left. They plan to cut 40 rafters, each 20 feet long, and place them in pairs along the cabin's ridge, securing them with nails. To ensure vertical alignment, Eustace uses a rope to suspend the wood, maintaining the rafters in a vertical position. The work progresses steadily under their efforts. Suddenly the weather turns, bringing thunder and a heavy downpour, with temperatures dropping near freezing. They must continue the rafter installation as strong winds could topple them if the frame isn't closed. Despite the challenging conditions that stiffen their fingers, they persevere through the stormy weather, finishing their tasks while breathing on their hands to keep warm. Their persistence pays off as all the rafters are securely in place and they can rest. After a break, the weather improves and they resume work, beginning to install aluminum sheets on the roof for waterproofing. Raleigh nails the first sheet in place but breaks the floorboard as he descends, fortunately without injury. Relieved, they continue working. The aluminum sheets are somewhat heavy. Raleigh lifts them from below, then climbs up to help screw them in place. They manage to install all the sheets, successfully completing the roof. Next, they fill the gaps in the walls by nailing thin wooden boards over them. After a busy period, the cabin construction nears completion, and they are very satisfied with their work. The next day, they return to logging as they need to make a payment this week. They cut some thick logs, load them onto a truck with an excavator, and after filling it, head home. They process the logs into planks using a sawmill, reload the truck, and set off to deliver 100 planks to a customer before dark to avoid losing the order. After a rush, they successfully reach their destination, and the customer is pleased with the planks, finalizing the deal. Watching Raleigh's increasingly proficient performance, Eustace feels proud and optimistic about the future.